commodities are the products of labor. Commodities in a capital system are also, and in a different sense, products of capital. So how is capital compared to other capitals as the producers of commodities? And that's the sort of the issue that's at the heart of what I want to say. Okay, so in volume 1, where we just give it a slight qualification, Marx is presupposing a capitalist mode of production, but he looks at commodities as simple commodities. So they are differentiated by their use. I mean, some of them are red, some of them are yellow, some of them are used to drink, some are used to sit on, and so on, right? So despite the complete differentiation by use value, there is an equalization and a social process of equalization. And that is the necessary equivalence of different socially necessary labor times. Now, the socially necessary labor time does not appear on the surface. It is expressed in something other than itself. And this other than itself is the exchange value. So the socially necessary labor time, if you like, is the content or the substance of value. An exchange value is the way it appears, the form of value. Now, this part of capital is probably, in a way, sort of like a very big bump to get past right at the very beginning, and quite often people just go around it, because why trouble yourself with a bump all the time? But if we just keep going back and worrying away at what Marx is doing here, right? Quite obviously, his one of the problems in understanding what he's doing is quite a very simple potential misunderstanding, which he uses this equal sign, right? If you look at section 3 of chapter 1, he uses an equal sign, and when he says that 20 yards of linen equal 1 coat, okay, well, it's not our normal understanding of equal, right? What he's actually saying is expressed by, okay? So equal amounts of labor are expressed by equal amounts of money. That's what Marx is saying in chapter 1 of volume 1, okay? Now, when we come to the transformation, we're not only talking about commodities that are products of labor, but commodities that are products of capital. Now, in order to satisfy this slightly idealized idea of equalization of capitals by having a common rate of profit, there is a differentiation by sector of the not of the commodities' use values, but of their socially necessary labor time, which I'm going to try to explain means that there's a disequalization of labor. Okay, so under the conditions of the transformation, equal amounts of labor are not expressed by equal amounts of money. This is an absolutely necessary condition of the capitalist mode of production. So I'll just repeat that. Equal amounts of labor are not expressed by equal amounts of money. So if you like, it's a violation of the simple law of value by a more advanced, specifically capitalist law of value. And again, I'll try my best with the analogies. What I'm trying to say here is that if you like, the light is the living labor, and the way the light appears, if you like, it's shining from inside. It's produced. The light is produced in production, and the way it appears on the surface is different to what it is on the inside. And the difference, or the reshaping, or the reshaping is fine. The reconfiguration of the light is according to the size of the capital which set that living labor in motion. Okay, so how labor appears is not as itself, and not even simply as money, but it appears as an adjunct of the capital. It's distorted by the mass of the capital. The mass of the capital bends the living labor according to its own gravity. Now, historically, The transformation problem, you may recall this, I spoke right at the beginning of different schools of thought within Marxism. And if we go back to the middle of the 20th century, for example, the dominant is not quite the right word, but the leading school within Marxism is the value embodied school. And Paul Sweezy is probably the leading exponent of this, who was subsequently critiqued. Now, what Sweezy and his contemporaries, how they considered the transformation problem was you actually needed two systems of accounting. You needed, on the one hand, to account for what was going on in terms of labor units, which would be units of time, and on the other hand, needed to account for what was going on at another level, which was in parallel with labor units would need money. So in a kind of sense, you had two solutions to one problem. And of course, this is a misspecification of the problem, but even within its own terms, it had a problem to solve, which is how you collect labor time with money. And so within this school, we've developed sort of different tactics to find a bridge between these two realms. Invent something else, which acts as the bridge between them. This approach was critiqued by Anwar Sheikh, David Yaffe, and others in the 1970s. And they rightly said, well, the definition of the commodity is not separate from the definition of money. I mean, if we're defining the commodity's exchange value, it also means that we're in effect defining money. And so that a value cannot be expressed in any other way except as a sum of money in a commodity producing system. So there's a necessary relationship between the content of value and the form of value, hence the notion of value form. So the solution to the transformation problem has to be expressed in money terms. There is not a separate unit of account in hours of labor time. And pretty much that's how things have rested. I mean, in the subsequent theoretical generations, there's been a quite bad-tempered, I would say, or what, discussion about how to connect these two realities. One solution is to say, well, in the early days of capitalism, we did have simple values, and later on they became prices of production, which is pretty much what Engels' interpretation of Marx was. Much more common these days is what you could call an iterative solution, which is based on the idea of inputs and outputs, which start off as simple values and end up as prices of production. And the bad temper comes in because people are arguing about these inputs and outputs. I mean, should we convert the inputs at the same time as the outputs, or should they be in sequence or in parallel, and so on? Misses the point. As I can indicate, again, it's been shown more than once, but nonetheless, the predominant sort of interpretation is around this inputs-outputs model in the literature today. And of course, what I'm arguing, and I mean, I follow another line of thought, which is present in literature as well, particularly in the non-English literature, I would say, which is that the transformation is much more about the inner to outer rather than the input to the output. And the contradiction lies not between inputs and outputs of commodities, but the contradiction lies between the inner nature of value and its outer form of expression. And I'll come back to that, but I'll try and sort of sensitize what I mean by that by just looking at Marx's solution from the perspective of labor, okay? Because Marx's solution is actually dominated by the issue of the equalization of capitals. What do I mean by this? So this is taken from chapter 9 of volume 3. And if you look at the left-hand column, you see the different sectors. And all the sectors have got a capital invested in them of 100, let's say 100 million pounds, okay? And what Marx does, as is well known, he changes the So all of these add up to 100, okay? But what he's changing is the internal composition of the capital totality of 100. So this one, which